This episode of Speak Now, Hold Your Peace is brought to you in part by Green Sister Botanicals, plant-based hair and body care. Visit greensister.com for your hair and body care needs. There are a lot of black men, and I know a few that go to the doctor, and their reason for going was because they didn't want to get nagged by their significant other. Got their name on the bottom. You know, it says Nelly, special co-host. Speak Now, Hold Your Peace. Same thing for David. They come on the show. They my number one hitter. Every time there's a shooting, people are saying, you know, we need more gun control.
Welcome to Speak Now, Hold Your Peace, a live broadcast with real conversations about community social issues, politics, business, health, self-care, and more. We broadcast live on the Speak Now, Hold Your Peace Facebook group and the Speak Now, Hold Your Peace YouTube channel. And now, here's your host, Say What I Feel, Dre.
Welcome to Speak Now, Hold Your Peace. I'm Say What I Feel, Dre, and today we have a special guest. Got a good show for you. This show is specifically for, those parents or moms or dads who, are thinking about, considering a group home for your children. We're going to talk about, its effectiveness and, some of the things. So we'll give you a little bit of everything so you're well-informed and you can make a well-informed decision. With me, I have one of my former supervisors that I used to work with in a group home. And I thought it would be an asset to have him on here. He's very knowledgeable, very well-rounded, a logical thinker, a very logical thinker. And I say that, a very logical thinker, because, I need somebody to help me through some things, when I get upset at work, them kids got me, and he was always there to put the logic right in my mind, which is good, You gotta praise a supervisor like that. But I got my man, Sean Reeves. What's going on, brother?
How are you, brother? It's
man,
good seeing you. Good seeing you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again, man. It's very good to see you, man. I ain't gonna waste no time, man. I just want to jump right into it. So, the show is about, the effectiveness of group homes and, detention centers. More group homes than detention centers. I just want to add the detention center in because I have a few questions about that. But let's get started. When I mention group homes to people like parents and stuff like that, they think, they automatically go to the negative thinking. And it's typically like, it's not true, really. I mean, it's not, it's not all bad. We hear the bad stories. What are some good things in your experience that you know that are good in terms of group homes?
Well, I think that in my experience, and the best things that can come from that is the collaborative effort of giving space to a parent and to their child so that they can have some perspective, right? Very often when we have our kids and they're right there, particularly when they're having hard times and they're struggling with things or getting themselves into situations that, are making us worried or concerned, right? We can only see that part of them. And we can only see, and we struggle to pull the positives out because there's just so much to criticize based off of the behavior. And so sometimes having that distance can give perspective to the parent of what they do miss about their child, as well as for the child being away from the family, understanding the connection, the love, the care, the capacity of the parent and what that really means in a different perspective because they are no longer receiving that and they are in a different environment. Right. So I think that separation can be really a positive one, as well as, the ability to see it through another lens by having like a counselor or somebody in there to help mediate some of that interaction. Right. I think that helps to bring out the relationship and draw on the things that are needed between the parent and the child as well.
Right. And you something you said just reminded me, like, sometimes it's not always 100% the child. Sometimes it's parenting skills that you might find out while they're in a group home, doing family therapy and stuff like that. It could be the parent also. So that's a good point. For the
Yeah.
parents who are considering a group home, um, what is the process for getting in? And I know each state is different in terms of, you're in Jersey. What is, do you know the process of getting in? Is it a hard process?
So, so it's based off of the state itself, um, particularly here in Jersey, they're looking at family reunification. So they're trying to do their best to keep the family intact. And so they're going to start with internal things first, right? So they'll try and put services in the house with wraparound services. So you would call like a community care provider and state division. Maybe it's a DCPMP, or a DIFUS type of situation where you kind of call a company that's like that, that's into the state, and they would then provide you with services. And then they would usually typically send you like with an in-home therapist. If things are really kind of difficult, they may send you to like have your child go to a day program where they're getting their education as well as therapeutic support, and then engaging in family therapy. And then, if it rises to the occasion that the group home level is needed, that would be the next step. And then thereafter would be some of the more confined type spaces that may be residential programs and or juvenile detention centers. So that's kind of the breakdown of how the tiers go. So it always, particularly in New Jersey, when parents are looking for support, it starts in home first, and then it will get further and further away from the home if it's required.
Okay. Okay. Um, I hear this. I heard this from parents all the time. Not a lot of parents, but quite a few. Well, I don't want my child going to group home because I don't want him to come out worse. Do you think? And I think personally, each case is different. It's a case by case basis. But do you think group homes, for the most part, hinder the progress of a child, being that the different things that they're introduced in there as well as the good?
Well, I think that that's something that I've pondered before, and I believe that parents have to be real with themselves. And being that I have worked in juvenile correctional facilities as well as, the transitional housing that we were in, if it's based off of a child and their behavior that's concerning behavior, um, the reality is that child, if they are putting themselves in those situations, um, are already dealing with the people that they're going to come across in those environments.
Right.
Um, you know, Particularly in like group settings, if they're already engaged in that level of person. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you're saying like a detention center, yeah, they may boost up a level of who they're running into and how they need to handle and comport themselves to manage. But on a group home level and that way, they're already engaging people that are of that caliber, and in some cases they are already that person that the parent is worried about them
Mm-hmm.
coming in
Yeah.
contact with. They
Absolutely.
just don't know the full story of their child.
Right.
you
Right.
know
Yeah. That.
when you think about it, our children spend what, 6 to 7 hours a day in school.
Right. Right.
And if a teacher contacts us, that's based off of one incident in the day.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What
Yep.
happened in all those other incidents that they didn't get caught, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You're right. You're
it's
right.
just a different perspective there.
Yeah. This is funny because they're no, that's my baby. He wouldn't do nothing. Yeah, he would. The gun was in his
you know
hand, lady. There's the video. That's him. That's him. Like, let me stop though. Let me ask you. That ain't my baby. Okay. All right. Same
Not my
tattoo.
baby.
Same scar right there. Okay. All right. Uh,
Yeah.
Let me ask you, as you mentioned detention centers, do you think the programs in detention centers, juvenile detention centers, are adequate, or do you think they might need a slight change for the better?
Um, Juvenile detention centers are a whole thing of themselves, and there definitely needs to be a reform in how they're done, particularly based off of my experience in Jersey, because the deterioration of them based off of the lack of funding prevented, when I started there were kids that were leaving out with their cosmetology license. So they had marketable trades. They had auto mechanics. So students were able to get leave, and they were able to go do oil changes and tire changes and, do kind of maintenance on cars. They had a detailing shop. So you could literally, as long as you emptied everything out of your car, you could take it into the facility and they would totally detail your car from top to bottom and it looked brand new.
Hmm.
And so they had some really marketable trades that were going on in there. And over time, because that was no longer the focus and the idea of reform, they wanted them in the residential programs where they were able to have more community contact, which made sense to a degree. But at the same time, those that wound up in the detention centers, they weren't getting what they really needed.
Right.
They did
Right.
offer more college and stuff, but that wasn't really applicable to a lot of the students, residents, and where they came from and where they were going back to. It wasn't necessarily something that was on their plate, and they were, once again, like when we talk about logic, right? When you're a kid and you're bringing in $1,000 a day, am I going to go and bust my butt in a college class spending grands and I could be making them, right?
Exactly.
Like the
Exactly.
mathematics doesn't exactly add up. So when the student was leaving and was able to go into a barbershop and they were able to make, 2,000 a week or something like that. Yeah, it was not the same, but you know what? It's an honest living and I'm not doing bad.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You know,
What do you, jumping back to group homes, what do you think is the biggest problem in group homes for, in terms of children succeeding?
the biggest challenge I see there is a level of consistency, right? You've seen it, right? When I had you on shift, I could trust you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you were a great person because I had you in the evening. So I cherished you because you were somebody I could trust. I knew
Right.
if people needed to be places, if things needed to happen, they were going to happen.
Right.
Where in certain times, if you weren't on, like the continuity of services and one person's commitment to the helping of the children, one won't look the same, even if you
Mm-hmm.
set it up to say this is what needs to be done. Personality clashes between the people that are there and the
Yeah.
staff. If staff has their own issues, right? And so trying to find the proper team and tandem to work in the environment that's going to be supportive of the kids and be able to help the kids to blossom, you
Right.
know many more times, right? For me, the kids are coming in and we know that they have their own battery of whatever,
Right.
and it's usually some level of trauma, and people will say, oh, it's ADHD, oh, they're oppositional defiant. And most of those kids, like I know, they had some level of trauma that they came across,
Right.
and
Right.
that was the action out. And a lot of times, and even as adults, even just growing up, we will act out of our own traumas, but because there is the capacity to say this is the DSM, okay, this person fits into this category, they do these types of things, it's easy to slap a label on it, write them off, throw some meds at them, right? But they come in with these battery issues. So the more people are trauma informed, and I don't think that happens enough on the base level,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, and it's not, it's no shade for people's academic experience. I feel it's the responsibility of the people that are the people that own the group homes, in essence, that they should be training their people on trauma informed care and how to deal with people that are coming in with trauma
Mm-hmm.
and being able to handle that. And part of it is like, well, the world's hard, so you got to, you can't just treat them with kid gloves. No, however, they may need that to get to the place where they can even comprehend what it takes to survive in the world.
Right.
And so I think the level of continuity between shifts and things like that becomes a big barrier. And the other part is, if they don't have family support, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't get that reprieve from that space to be able to actually go apply the skills they may be learning in the group home. And
Mm-hmm.
so the only thing happens is they go from the group home to the real world or to
Right.
some other program, and they have to figure out to play a whole nother game, right? Whereas, or if they do have family support and the family's not involved, they're going to try and apply those things, but it's very easy to go back into a space, and it's one of those like classical conditioning, that Pavlovian dog ringing the bell and it salivates, right? Like you go back into the same space that you left, even if you're different, the things around you will trigger you and pull you back to that space. And
Yeah.
sometimes you can be trying to do the right thing, but if it has the odor or aroma of something you used to do, the people that are so accustomed to seeing you do those old things, they will lean into that and think you're up to your old tricks.
Right.
Like
Right.
I've had students, they would call me and they're like, it's so hard. My mom doesn't trust me, right? And I'm like, I'm just going to work, and they're coming home from work. Their eyes are bloodshot, and they're drowsy and they're tired because they've never worked a day in their life for real in the streets, and their parents are thinking they're getting high,
Mm.
and the parent is like on their back. Oh, you're back up to your stuff, blah 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 blah. Oh, I'm going to tell your PO, and they're like, I'm just going to work. I'm just trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those types of things, when the parents aren't involved while this child is in these programs, they don't get to see the maturation and shift of change of who the child is. And so if a parent is to put their child in one of these programs, their participation is paramount.
Mm-hmm.
It's paramount, because if they're not there to witness and hear how they're engaging their child and giving them the verbiage and the language, how to address their child, and
Mm-hmm.
how their child is now responding, and how their child may speak or act, and being able to see that they are making an effort,
Right.
out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
And
Right.
so when you come back into sight, you're still the same person,
Mm-hmm.
unless you prove yourself different. But adolescents don't have that mentality to be able to verbalize per se, oh, this is what I'm trying to do, or I'm doing something different, or this is what. As soon as they get accused, that adolescent comes up and they're like, oh, you just keep
Yeah.
blah blah blah,
Yeah.
and back to the drawing board. Here we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
It's a good point, especially with the parent participation. That was one of the questions that I had for you. You know, what's the impact of parents participating? I think that goes a long way. Because I think kids need verbal praise. When they get it from their parents who have made at some point, say you ain't gonna be nothing, you ain't this and that, and then they come in the group home and see them making progress, and they say I'm proud of you. It'll go a long
Mm-hmm.
way. It can motivate the kid to do even better. So I think it's very important, that parents participate and just be involved, and don't look at it as a babysitting service like he's gone for 6 weeks or whatever it may be, the time may be.
Mm-hmm.
Just got to be part of that. They're attending the residential facility, but so are you, mentally, and physically you'll attend because you got family therapy sessions and stuff like that. It's very important. So
Right.
all the parents who think who don't know that when you put your child in a residential facility, you will probably be more than likely asked to come up there to participate in family sessions, and just check on the child, make sure the progress is good and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. Do you feel, because a lot of people tell me that it's not, I particularly think it is, but do you feel that group homes are safe for the most part?
I think for the most part they are.
Right.
I believe that for the most part, the people that walk into this line of work tend to have a heart to try and do what's right. And the intent is not to harm, but is to do good. And right, I'm the first to say that at the end of the day, intentions don't mean anything in comparison to impact. Right? If you impact me and then say, oh, that wasn't my intention, well, I don't really quite care about your intention because
Right.
you impacted me, right? Um, and so I think that a lot of people go there with the intentions of doing good. It's once again the quality of the training that they're receiving to be able to bolster up their ability and their heart for the work, so that they can take in and have different perspectives of how they're engaging the children or the resident, so that, because right, when a kid's in a new place, they're going to test the waters, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to poke and they're going to prod, and they have more time than any of the staff does to observe what goes on, how people operate. And like any kid, they're going to try and bend, manipulate, however you want to phrase it,
Yeah.
to get the most for themselves.
Right.
And that's just being a kid, right? Like, I mean, as adults, I don't know that there are many adults that if they find a space where they can take an advantage of something and not cause any harm, they're going to take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
And, and you're talking about fully formed minds that are willing to take advantage of situations, let alone these unformed minds that are in the growth process. They're like, how can I be more comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
Right? At home, they were trying to figure ways, and now they're like, well, how can I be more comfortable?
Right. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
this staff will let me get away with this, or that person let me get away with that, or if I do this, I can get that. And
Yeah.
so I think those dynamics come out. And so depending on who the person is, how they are, yes, they can have elements where or things that could happen that may be of risk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's any place, right? Let's be
Right.
real. A child goes to school, there's a level of risk.
Right. Right.
If it's a bully, if it's whatever, so it's just being mindful of participation and engagement.
Right.
And that's where the parent engagement becomes very important, because if the parent is involved and they're showing their face and they're engaging the staff and showing their care for their child and showing respect to the staff is going to look on that child in a different way and be knowledgeable that, oh, they're involved. They'll right around the corner. I can't, even if they are a negative level staff, I can't mess with that kid because their parents are present.
Right. Right.
And that's another level of the parent support that makes a big difference.
Right. In your experience, if what you've seen in terms of kids coming and going, do you think the success rate of group homes is more on the high side or the low side?
Um,
and that's a loaded question, because
it's so loaded.
When I say progress, I mean if they have even a tiny bit of progress, I would consider that success.
And so I think I honestly believe that every kid that goes in there, short of just not wanting to be there and just doing everything they can to get out, will get something out of any program that they're in. And it's what we're looking at in the identity of progress, right? And I think, once again, those who achieve at the highest level have that family support. They have some level of a system of people around them that are building them up as they're going through the process. There are other people that are just in bad situations. They're just trying to figure out how to manage life. And so they're doing what they have to do in that situation, and they're trying to get on the straight path, and they figure their life out, and then there are those that, okay, well, I ain't gonna rob nobody no more. But that car's over there running. Right? So they're not harming anybody anymore. That's progress.
I mean, he did leave it on. I mean, right.
Wasn't that a gift? So I thought it was a gift for me.
Right. He left
I found it just like Columbus found America, right?
Right. Oh man. So, let me ask you this. When children go to group homes, it's not an overnight thing. Change is not an overnight thing. I always used to stress that. Like, things are not going to change within a week or a month. What is the average time a child resides in a group home?
Typically, it will be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. It's not terribly long in group homes. It's usually, I will rephrase that. It depends on the style of group home. It depends, like if it's a child who's in the DIFAS system that doesn't have a guardian per se, and it's looking into that borderline foster type of thing. So there are what they call teaching families that will have children in their homes for years, and they're teaching them skills, and they basically become foster parents. They just don't have the title, and they don't do the adoptive piece or any of those other pieces per se, but they do support and teach the kids skills. But as it pertains to people that have family support, it's usually 3 to 6 months. It's not a whole lot of time, because typically it's just trying to get the child in a workable place,
Mm-hmm.
and then they want to step them down into like a day program, so they're still programming, but now they're having more access to the family and engaging in the family. And then it's the outpatient therapy, so they go to a program after school once they've gotten it, and then it's back in the home and then trying to transition in. The thing that I see as the biggest problem in that step down system is that the continuity of care again, right? You
Mm-hmm.
get different caseworkers, you get different therapists. And so you're just as the child is having to transition in that 3 to 6 month time frame and figuring out that system. Once they go to this new system, they have a whole new system to
Right.
figure out
Right.
with a
Right.
whole new group of people,
And
right? And
rules.
so it's
Yeah.
not new rules, new people. So like in my ideal, it would be something like that. There would be a person that would be with them all the way through. So
Right.
right, they'd be able to be like, yo, Mr. Sean, all right, I'm their person from the group home and having those conversations with the family, nurturing, supporting. All right, well, let's look at this. This is how you change. This is what they're doing. Mom, dad, look at this. This is what's going on. Okay, this
Mm-hmm.
is this new setting. You're going to be here during the day, and then you're going to be at home at night. And there's a familiar face that both the parent and the child can lean on to have support. So there's some level of continuity, but
Mm-hmm.
that lack of continuity makes it difficult because it's always this kind of shift. And so like having case managers are good, right? Having consistent, because you're going to have kind of the same case manager, but case managers are just that, and that's not to say that case managers don't care or that they're not there for the people,
Right.
but their job is to find services and get them hooked up with things and make sure things are in order. Having a consistent therapist through that process is somebody that you're able to dump on and express the frustrations and express what's going on and the hurts and the disappointments, the fears of my child's coming back, and they seem like they're doing good, and I don't know what it's going to be like when they come back. Things have been good in the house, particularly if they
Mm-hmm.
have other siblings, and the other siblings behaviors have shifted and things have been better with them. And it's like there's so many dynamics that go on in a family that if you don't have that continuity with somebody that knows all of it all the way through and can actually take the time to talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Case managers don't have that time. That's not a luxury a good case manager has. And a good case manager that does that is going to be burned out.
Right. It
Going to be
definitely.
burned out, and they can't, and so I feel that there needs to be a consistent therapist through the process for that
Mm-hmm.
support and building building the child as well as the family.
Right. Uh, do you think? I want to jump to the education portion real quick. Do you think? I know a couple of parents feel like the child would be slighted if they went to a group home because of the school in terms of education. Do you think that in your experience, do you feel the education level, the quality of the education is lower or higher than regular public schools?
Um, yeah, that I do think takes a bit of a hit,
Mm-hmm.
because unfortunately, what happens is the stigmas, the stigmas that go with that.
Mm-hmm.
When people see a kid from this program in their school, they've already gotten a label, right? Oh, they're coming from that program, so they have issues, they got problems, they got this. The first thing that they're going to do is they're going to check their IEP and what's this person's background. And so the student can be a really intelligent student, and if they don't have somebody who's there to advocate for them in the way of their IEP, mind you, IEPs, like, I don't know how many people know, right? The only thing that a school can't do is pray and perform surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that can help your student learn, if it's another person, if it's different accommodations, the school is by law is mandated to do that if your child has an IEP. And a lot of people don't know that. So if they have an IEP, which most of the time they do, just because they're seen as behavior problems in some
Mm-hmm.
capacity. And for me, behavior does not have anything to do with intellect.
Right.
Um, it's an expression of an internal turmoil, which doesn't mean that they're incapable of learning or unable to, excel academically. It's just a matter that those things that are burdening them are more pressing than their time to sit down and read a book or
Right.
pay attention in
Right.
class. Um, and so I do believe that does take a bit of a hit. But once again, if the parent is Johnny on the spot and in and involved, and the school is seeing the parent showing up, even though it's not their district, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to treat that child different. That
Right.
child's not going to get the same experience. I mean, I can't express how important that is to
Mm-hmm.
have the parent present.
Right.
It's
Right.
so important. So important.
Yeah. Do you think there's a huge difference between group homes and juvenile detention for children?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Just the mentality of having, people that are trained and care versus having custody staff, right, that are there in uniforms, and they're trained in law enforcement. They're
Mm-hmm.
trained in keeping order. Um, and I say that very, very loosely. They're
Right.
they're trained in not so nice words. They're trained in being jerks.
Right. Yeah.
Like all they want is to keep order. And
Mm-hmm.
so if it's keeping order by allowing the kids to do the same exact things they were doing on the streets and getting drugs in or things like that so that they can keep everything cool and make their shift easy, and or those that are on the complete other side of it that are just being jerks and treating them as such because they're a criminal, they're no good, they're useless, they did this, they did that, you're a horrible human being, and I'm going to treat you like such and beat you down even more while you're here and re-traumatize you,
Mm.
thinking, oh, that'll teach you won't want to be here because you're hurting so much because I tortured you so bad. Yeah, no, it's only going to make them more bitter, and they'll wind up right back.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that type of custodial mentality that happens in a juvenile detention center versus what happens in a group home is way different. It's
Mm-hmm.
much more intimate. You're dealing with less people. You have your own clothes. You're not in a jumpsuit, right? Like,
Yeah.
and once again, you can get support from your family in a way that is beyond the every other weekend type of thing,
Got you. Got
or
you.
every weekend type of thing. So the level of support you can receive, the level of advocacy that can take place by the parent in support of their child is the levels are so varyingly different that yeah, it's night and day.
Mm.
Because even group homes are even to me even better than residential programs because once again you're still stuck in kind of a formatted almost pseudo uh, detention set detention center set mind. You get
Mm-hmm.
your own clothes, but it's very much regimented in that same way of the detention center. And in some of them they actually still have custody staff, not as much but they still have it.
Mm-hmm.
um, but the mindset is it tends to be focused um, on that kind of punitive behavior process versus a growth and development process that takes more place in group homes.
Right. Right. What happens when children age out? Like if they're in a group home or a residential facility, what happens when they age out? I think what is it, 21, something like that. What?
21.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's well, that's where we worked, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you see some of that, depending on the motivation of the student or the resident. Like some of them will pick up, they'll figure out how to get jobs. You can teach them the skills of how to manage your money, how to get an apartment, and be able to have a job. Um, but quite frankly, it's kind of like DCP&P, whoever that person, particularly if they don't have a family of support, it's good luck. Hope you make it. And that's the size. Those who have family and support, it's how the parents then decide to navigate it, right?
Hmm.
They can very easily set down some really stringent guidelines and say, look, this is how you're going to do life now, or you just got to go.
Right.
Um, and typically, as it pertains to people that are as kids that are aging out, that's really to the identity of like foster care and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, and if a child hasn't had like contact with DCP&P before their 18th birthday, it's virtually impossible for them to get services in that line of support that's going to help them age out. It really becomes, once they become 18, it becomes the shelter systems, the you know, the make it how you can, staying in the YMCA, whatever it is, the shelters, and trying to find a job. So like 18, 17 is really that cutoff to get real assistance from the state or any other entity, because once they become an adult, it's now you're dealing with social services and all those
Hmm.
other type of things that, oh, can you get a spot in Section 8 and get a house over here, and for subsidized rent, can you do this, can you do that?
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
18 is really the magic number as it pertains to anyone who hasn't had DCP&P or some type of child protective history.
Okay. I'm gonna ask you this real quick. Some parents, I've had parents say, the medication that they're giving my child is inappropriate. Now, in cases like that, if they feel like the medication is inappropriate, what can they do?
So that is uh, uh, that is a hard one,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes, depending on the behavior of the child, depending on how egregious it may be, they may have contracts and they may have things that they're signing off on in the beginning that say, we will do this to maintain, this child maintain behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there are times that people, or students will come out and they're like vegetables, and they're so lethargic. Like, what are you giving this child?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, they're rambunctious and they do this and they do that, right? And so I'm not one that ascribes to medication prescribing for maintenance of behavior. Um, it's needed for some people,
Mm-hmm.
and it's used in that way for people, but good psychiatrists will do it in a way that the increments in which they increase the child's medication, you will see the behavior change slowly. They'll actually start with a placebo effect, really,
Mm-hmm.
and to the degree that what they're taking shouldn't even do anything. And if the child has this miraculous behavior change because they're on this medication, it really speaks to the child's shift in thought that something is happening and that they actually know how to behave. And it's a matter of finding the right motivators and how to help them and support them in that.
Right.
Um, but usually, what will happen is they'll put them on a very low dose, little to nothing will happen. They'll complain, nothing's happening, and they'll say,
Mm-hmm.
okay. But they want to build it up in their system so that
Right.
their body's not put into some level of shock.
Yeah.
And then they'll
Yeah.
put them into a dose in the next month that will help them to actually have some result based off of the medication.
Right.
And
And
the
I,
hope is,
yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, then the hope is that the medication will sustain them in a way that while they're learning the tools in the program, they'll learn how to maintain themselves and comport themselves in a way that's acceptable. They'll be able to be more amenable to hearing feedback. And then eventually the medication can be tapered off. And because they've learned those skills, they can keep applying them without the medication,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Right.
once again, I believe that's where that parent involvement comes, right? Like, I know my child, let's look at this. How do we taper this medication back so that we can see what's going on here,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, and I tell any parent, if you see a psychiatrist throw more than two medications at a child at one time, back away from that.
Right. Right.
Right? There are medications that are used in combination for support of each other based off of symptoms and things like that.
Right.
Um, but at the same time, more than two is way too much. And typically, they will try and only use one
Mm-hmm.
because you're introducing something new to somebody's body, and you want to be able to see what the response is. And if you offer two things at one time, the reality is if something goes awry, if there's a reaction, you don't know which one it is,
Exactly. Exactly.
right?
Yep.
So you have to do it one at a time. So
Right.
these are things to be able to tell if you're dealing with a good psychiatrist that is being honorable of your child's body and giving them that medication,
Right.
is how do they prescribe, what are the doses they're prescribing in, and how many medications are they trying to prescribe at any given time,
Mm-hmm.
and how they adjust the medications as well.
Right.
So those are like some of the ways of being able to really pay attention to the relationship there with the medication and the prescriber.
Yeah. And I've heard parents say, "Oh, the doctor, he's not doing nothing because he changed his medicine and it ain't working." Um, if you and I tell parents like, and even if any parents are watching now, if you have a doctor that wants to do everything slow, you're very lucky. Like you're very lucky. There are doctors who just throw it out there that I'm not gonna
Mm-hmm.
say they don't care, but they're just used to doing things their way. It's a lack
Right.
of concern for the parents. Like, it's like your thought doesn't. Sometimes your thought may not count, or they may think, okay,
Mm-hmm.
they know what's best for your child. But if you have a doctor that's prescribing medication and it's a little bit at a time, be happy, because what happens is, like you said, we, in terms of behavior, some medications are given to children to get them in a place where they can um, learn appropriate skills to do things. And once they learn these appropriate skills, for after a while, then you can take them off that medication, like Sean said, and then they'll still be used to doing those appropriate behaviors, right? It's no
Right.
different, and it's no different from training wheels. Like, you want your kid to behave compared to you want your kid to learn how to ride a bike. You're not just going to throw them on that bike and tell them to ride. No, you're going to have to put training wheels on there, okay? So the training wheels are the medication. So let him practice with that, with the bike, with the training wheels. He's riding, and all of a sudden he's doing all these great skills, learning all these skills, and he's learning how to ride the bike. And now it's just to the point where you don't want to take the training wheel, both of them off, because you just don't want to take them off cold turkey. You got to wing them off. So instead of taking off both training wheels, you take off one, because you notice he's leaning to the left side all the time. So you take off that right training wheel because he ain't leaning to the right. So he's good there, meaning his behavior is good. He does this well. He does this well. Now you're taking him off slowly, and then you come to a point where he's riding that bike with one training wheel, or he's doing these practices with medication, and he's doing it right. And then you say, okay, it's now time to take off that second training wheel. He takes it off and he's riding. He's good. Now it's time to take him off that medication. Okay, he took him off, and now he's doing these skills. So that's why parents, doctors do that thing. They do it slow. You just can't go cold turkey with that. So
And be mindful, they still will fall.
exactly. Yes, they will
And
have.
so even when
Good
the
point.
skills
Very
don't
good
make
point.
and don't match, and they start to act up and push back, and the skills aren't being applied to right, like, they are still children. So
Exactly. Good point.
give them the grace and space of that. They will still fall even once all that happens, and you just have to be mindful of that. They are kids.
Absolutely.
I think one of the big pieces is that people don't necessarily know or aren't really informed about the brain development of people in general. And so you can look it up. There are research articles that show between the ages of 15, 16, and 25, that group of people need the most amount of sleep next to baby and infants. And the reason being is that there's such a large transition that's going on there, where they're coming into a level of adulthood. And a lot of people don't know that our prefrontal cortex, which is in the front of our head, is finally done cooking when we're 25. Somewhere 25, 26 is where our brain fully is developed. Up to that point, that free prefrontal cortex is what controls impulse controls and all of those types of rambunctious behaviors, particularly we see in our boys, right? It's that lack of mortality, this like, I can rule the world.
Yeah.
that stuff doesn't get kind of closed off in our mind until we're
Right.
25.
Right.
So when you're talking about, people that are 14 to 17, they're just in the real front part of that part where they can start really smelling themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't really know. And so
Right.
when they do shift and their behavior starts to change, yeah, they're still likely to fumble and stumble and mess up because their brain fully isn't cooked yet. And
Right.
so once they even turn 18, between 18 and 21, right? Like, this is why college students are such high students, because they are adults. They have access to a whole lot of stuff, and their brain and their mortality and their impulse control is still not in place. And so a lot of times you'll see this shift at like 23, 25 in there. You're like, why? You're a different person. Yeah, because their
Right.
brain
Right.
finally it finally grew, you
Yeah.
know. And
Yeah.
so I think that that's another component that people have to be mindful of when dealing with their children, and particularly behaviors.
Right. Right. And that's a good point, man. I'm gonna end the show on that point because I think that was. I usually ask for a final word at the end, but I think that was a good final word. Like, trust the process. Know that they're gonna be some stumbles, and just go with it. They're
Yeah.
not gonna be perfect all the time. It's a process. So, hey, man, I want to thank you, man, for coming on. I appreciate it, man. This was very informative. I hope people got something out of it, man. And I gotta have you back. Gotta have you back on here, man. So keep your calendar open, man. I'm gonna be reaching
I
out
got
to
you.
you. All right.
I got you.
I want you to stay on while I exit out. But everybody else, you stay on. Everybody else, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you. I don't take this platform lightly. I'm glad I have this platform to do good things and give informative information. So thank you so much for tuning in. And I'll see you next week. Next week we're gonna have another good show. And I might have him back, so we'll see. But see y'all later. Have a good one. Peace. And I'm out.
Appreciate you.
Thank you for watching the Speak Now Hold Your Peace live broadcast. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and join us on the Speak Now Hold Your Peace Facebook group.